right. Hello, everyone. My name is Leonard Slutsky, and on behalf of the USC Suzanne Dvorak-Peck School of Social Work, I'm delighted to welcome you to our community forum today titled A Community-Based Approach to Social Justice and Community Healing. Today's forum was developed by and will be facilitated by one of my wonderful colleagues and senior lecturer of social work, Robert Hernandez. We are in for a real treat today. I am pleased to introduce our first presenter, Fabien Deborah, the artist and executive director of the Homeboy Art Academy. Fabien, you can take it away.
Got it. Sorry, I was on mute. Hi, my name is Fabien Deborah, and I am the executive director of Homeboy Industries. And today I'm going to talk about, how one can take their lived experience and lessons learned or life lessons learned and try to create something that is going to be not only beneficial, but accessible to some of the impacts that our communities have encountered. I grew up in the housing projects of Aliso Village. I am raised in Boyle Heights. I grew up in the 80s when there was a crack cocaine epidemic and the decade of violence. The first obstacle that I was encountered with was immigration. I come from both parents who are immigrants. They all come here to Los Angeles to seek a better life, not knowing what they're up against. And behind being a first generation Mexican American, I felt the impact of that, of the immigration status, meaning that deprived, right, of opportunity in many ways and many levels. My father, the choice he made in order to provide for his family, he decided to be a drug dealer. So because we're from El Paso, Texas, which is border town to Juarez, Mexico, he would transport drugs from Juarez into El Paso into Los Angeles. And when we were raised in these housing projects, there was nothing but, there was 8 local gangs in that environment. I think that's where the impact began. Eventually, like every story, many of the stories we hear in our communities, due to the absence of hope, I then too fell into gang subcultures. But in these times of being expelled from school and all this, I discovered one thing. And this thing that I discovered that belonged to me and no one could take away was the gift of art. At a very young age, I realized that my only refuge that I had at the moment was my gift of art. And so when the domestic violence disputes would take place in my household, when police rude awakenings will come and take my father away, I would go and hide under this coffee table with a long drape. And there I would pick up my notebook and create my own worlds to escape my reality. That's when I discovered art to be meaningful, and it gave me a sense of worth and a glimpse of hope. I embraced that gift of art, but due to the challenges that I was up against in the 80s, a lack of resources, I then too fell to the vacuum that exists within our communities, which is that of gang culture. I joined a gang at a very young age, and that led me to now contribute to the cycle of violence as my father had initiated in and out of incarceration at a very young age. East Lake Central Juvenile Hall, Camp Gonzales, Camp McNear, later on to also fulfill the county jails and the adult institutions. Although even though I went through all this turmoil and became a drug addict, I never lost sight of this gift. This gift of art gave me a sense of like a peace of mind. It gave me an idea. It gave me something to hold on to, clench on to, because if it wasn't for this gift, I could have done a lot more worse things. And the power of the arts is very, very vital. So, I can share a lot about my life, personal life story, but, for me, it's like, even though I was tormenting my community, and as I start to reclaim my life and reconnect to my true self, I then too went to rehab, got the help, did the trusted model recovery. But I also recognize that I still live in my community. I still live in Boyle Heights in East LA. And I still recognize that a lot of the impacts that I encountered back in my upbringing still exist and still surround a lot of my people within the community of East Los Angeles. And so then what can I do as a formerly incarcerated, system-impacted individual who has gained a sense of knowledge through not only his lived experience, but also the understanding of the importance of the power and healing through the arts. So it was a must that I work hard on my vision and develop an art academy. And gratefully, I came to Homeboy Industries, which helped me also redirect my life and put me on a trajectory of education, getting my education through substance abuse lens as a state certified drug counselor. So how do I take that, my lived experience, combine it, and develop an amazing art academy, which is going to be accessible and equitable for the populations that we service? My intention is always gang-involved youth, not to exclude the system-impacted youth from our community. And everything that I do in this art academy is very intentional through cultural knowledge, historical knowledge, and traditional arts practices. I believe a lot of us have been removed so far away from our ancestral lineages, you know, and I think for me, those traditions, the rituals of not only Native American practices, but African American practices as well, is something that really, really resonates with a lot of the youth, and also inspire them and help them to also re-identify and reconnect in the most brilliant, articulate way. Now, these practices have been around for quite some time, although it's a trip when I hear the community say, oh, that's the non-traditional that you do? Nah, man, I say that's traditional. You don't get it twisted, because these practices have been going on for centuries, even prior to the modern day. So what I did is I have the Art Academy now, and I developed an art gang. It's called the Art Gang. The Art Gang is a program which is built of leadership, and this the Art Gang is for formerly incarcerated young men and a young adult. And the reason why I say young adult is because a lot of the times they say that the youth and the adult have two different approaches and mindsets. I get that and understand that through a therapeutic lens. Although I also believe that in the gang subculture, if we're going up against the code of conduct, which is the mindset and the belief system, and if there is a perception that the youngster is looking up to the big homie, then how do we then allow the big homie, in this case, quote unquote, to serve as that mentor? So I call it active mentorship in the space, where we have those formerly incarcerated older men and women who have found a sense through their a sense of transformation through recovery, or whatever it is, through their own self-discovery, and then they help model and mentorship within the space, which helps create vulnerabilities and allows for the space to then serve as that healing, you know, the intentional healing that happens for the gang-involved youth. I also have Convivir. It is important for me. I recognize that we're losing a lot of our cultural aesthetics, and how do then we preserve these stories, right? So in order for really to bring healing in community, I think it's important for us to bridge the generational gap that has been created. And this generational gap has been created behind the various subcultures. And so we have our abuelitas, our grandmothers, who have given us those core values of what it's like to, you know, live, but yet for some odd reason, behind the choices that we've made, we have created this divide. So my duty is to make sure that I attend to the elderly, as well as the adults and youth, as well as the elementary school student. And so I did this program called Convivir. Convivir is to live with one another. And here is an intergenerational art program, which allows the mothers and daughters, fathers and sons to reconnect, and also pick up new learning communication skills through the arts. And everything that I do is through the arts. Arts is the vehicle to help build these interpersonal connections, to help with the coping skills needed for the external stressors and those obstacles that are so often familiar within our communities. I also have the Young and the Gifted, and the Young and the Gifted is a body of system-impacted youth and gang-involved youth. And we meet there every week, and we are trying to mold and build youth leaders, such as like Lupita that you're going to hear of, and youth leaders who are going to be part of the fabric. You know, most of the times I still realize now, and when I'm out in the field, you know, there's a lot of folks who talk about working with gang involved or system impacted, and minimally do you still see folks who come from that fabric on these tables, who are not making those decisions or helping to shape or design whatever it is that may be beneficial for this population. And I recognize that, you know, and it's like, wow, we're talking about gang involved, system impacted. Look around the room, there's like 3 of us here. What's wrong with that picture? So it is a custom for the young and the gifted to be influenced as youth leaders, so that they too can be part of the advocacy, and most importantly, of the shaping of the new programming that is going to be for them. And part of that, and that's how you begin to create access and inclusion, and most importantly, investment in the youth who have been so often overlooked. So we have that as well. I also work in Tehachapi State Prison through an organization called ACTA, and ACTA is Alliance California Traditional Arts. I've been with them for approximately 4 years, and we also work with lifers. And I've been there, Yard A, 4 years working with these lifers who seem to be hopeless, not feeling that they're coming home at any given time. But with all these new laws that are being passed, I'm over here to remind them and help them find a way to reignite hope and through the arts. And a lot of the base of this arts practices is restorative art practices through a cultural lens. And so these arts are through a cultural lens, meaning is something that is of relevancy to their experience as well as to their ethnicity, something that they are really going to take pride in and also help to build them up all over again and to reshape that perception that has been created due to the turmoil through the systemic issues, right? Or systemic infrastructure. With that being said, you know, there's a lot I can go on and continue to talk, but I'm a true testament of the power of the healing for the arts. I do believe that if it wasn't for my own personal practice in the arts, I too could have done a lot worse things that I've done, and thank God I'm still here. But one thing I did learn is that art is so powerful that at times when the suicidal tendencies will come, instead of acting on it, I would draw about it. And every time what I would draw about it, I realized in that moment, I did not decide to slash my vein. I had 2 suicide attempts. And then the second suicide attempt is when I really had my spiritual awakening and rediscovered that there is something much more greater than myself. And that is when I was prompted then to go get the help needed. And then I realized that, again, the power of the arts. If it wasn't for the arts, I could have probably lost a few more marbles up here because of the fact that it kept me sane throughout the 15 years of drug addiction, especially in this case, methamphetamine. And so if that is to be true, then it is a custom. And for me, it's not just about the art. I always say the art is secondary. It is the process that where you find the healing. And also, you know, for me, it's like I could simply be an artist, go pursue my career, go to galleries, have these great exhibitions and travel the world. But at the same time, in my own healing, and I know that healing is a lifetime process, it never stops. Then as a community member, how do I make it my responsibility, not only to make amends to myself, but also to the community that I once tormented by utilizing my discovery, but most importantly, my leadership skills that I've developed throughout the years, and then open the door right in the front of First and Elmo, right in the heart of East LA, so that these youth can find and have a refuge where they too can come and begin this healing process for themselves. And so they too can become the leaders to duplicate many Fabians and Lupitas in the world, so that this one day they too can make the world a safer place. And the way I would do now, I have about 7 minutes or so, so I'm gonna end it with this story and how I use the power of the arts. And this is just one glimpse of the effectiveness of the power of the arts. If you can bring that picture up, Leonard. In front of you, you see a picture drawn. This was drawn by a 5th grader, and it was out of 2nd Street Elementary in Boyle Heights. There is a project that I call a window to your soul. And this window to your soul is an invitation for us to get a glimpse of your soul. Usually what I do is I invite folks to get a 4x4 cardstock. And this 4x4 cardstock, before it becomes decorated, is usually white. And I share it in the air and I say, what do you guys see here? And they say, cardstock, white paper. And I go, true. But if art is about symbolism, the minute you place that cardstock on your chest, it has now become a window to your soul. So the invitation is to take me to a place, where you go to in times of trials and tribulations, or take me to a place of something that continues to want to hold you back, so that we can bring it in the air and hopefully start to work towards it. Or it could be an object given to you by a loved one, something that you still hold on to as a reinforcer for your healing or for inspiration. Or it could also be a person you go to in times of trials and tribulation, or someone that you hold on to that has helped you in your trajectory of life. So now go out and draw. And so, you know, of course, before I go, I bring this out, I set the tone and I create a brave space, and I allow for comfort to happen. A lot of the times when you're in LA Unified School District, the teachers find themselves to be limited in what they can share about or talk about because of the, because of the bylaws of LA Unified School District, but that doesn't pertain to me. So the first thing I do is I start to create a mirror image, and knowing that this school was in East LA, in Boyle Heights, where it's gang infested, violence and drugs, I then asked them, how many of us have how many of us know of gang members? I do, sir. My uncle's a gang member and he's always smoking weed in the backyard. Okay, but that should not define who you become as an individual. And I'm gonna tell you why. And then I go, how many of us have encountered family disputes, such as domestic violence? I saw my dad pull my mom's hair one time, sir, and he giggles, right? And these are real issues that some of these kids are carrying on a daily basis. And this is middle school, elementary. But the school keeps the teachers from getting at that. And so for me, the arts has allowed me to do so. So in this particular project, there was two kids. One was Rogelio, and we'll call the other one Mario. So little Rogelio goes off to draw, and the first thing he drew, it was an object, which was the toys of his brother and who had passed away. His little brother was an infant, and for some reason, he didn't make it to see the next day. And he loved his little brother, and he was reminded of his toys. So then I called, it was time to share back. So I go, okay, Rogelio, you go first. I go, what do you got? Let me hold the drawing for you. And that's gesturing, reinforcement, comfort. So I hold the drawing. He goes, here's a drawing of my brother's toys. And, I drew my brother's toys, sir, because he was a baby and he didn't wake up the next day. And that hurt me so much, sir. And I miss my brother. And he ran and he sat on his desk and put a shirt over his head. And I come as the facilitator, not the teacher, the facilitator. And I go over and I shove his little shoulders. And I say, it's okay, Rogelio. Your brother's actually smiling from above. The fact that you thought about him and his toys, that makes a big difference in that making him smile. Now remove your shirt. No need to be in shame. Okay, sir. All right, who's next? Mario. All right, come up, Mario. And then he says, this is a drawing of me and my brother. We're going in the park. And then the killer comes, sir, and he shot my brother in the head in front of me. And if you see the smiley face, I was happy first, then I became sad. You see how he raised the smiling face and then he put the sad face. He goes, but there's still hope, sir. You see that little line that's coming from the cloud? That's God holding you, sir. Wow. So the Mario runs to his desk, and it was up to me to build connections. So I tell little Mario, and there was a lot going on in the classroom, but I say, Mario, look at this. You are not alone. You see, Rogelio also lost his brother. There is a connection there. Now you guys can possibly get together and see how each one of you are dealing with these things. And they're so little, but believe me, they're growing up too quick, because of survival mechanisms and how they're surviving. So they're really advanced. And then once I was able to do that, the teacher comes up to me after the whole classroom, and I build connections and I held the space. And the teacher comes and she says, Fabian. I go, yes, ma'am. She goes, how is it that you do that? I go, what do you mean? You come in here and matter of seconds, you get all that out of them. And I said, maybe it's because they've seen a mirror image of themselves. Maybe it's because I've learned to ask the proper questions. And maybe it's a risk well taken. And she goes, well, little Mario is very disruptive in class. I can rarely get him to sit down and focus in this class. And then I get the drawing and I put it back out and I say, maybe because of this, his brother was killed. And that's probably why Mario could be disruptive in class and not ready to focus. But today, Mario was able to reveal and share that maybe moving forward, Mario can now become focused. And then she says, or maybe as the teacher, I too need to learn the proper questions. I always said, if behavior is a symptom, then where does it stem from? And all that came out of this work of art. But it's behind the process and the intentionality that healing will take place and ignite. It's in the facilitation. And the fact that I've had my education and I learned how to open wounds, tend to the wounds, and close the wounds, then it gives me that much of leverage to be able to facilitate such projects. And even being fifth graders, I made an impact that day. Thank you for letting me share. We got about 40 seconds left, so I think I did pretty good. All right, I'll pass the baton.
We get to the emergency room and a priest comes walking up to us. And he says, we have a body in room 2. And they open up the door to room 2, man. And there I see my son's feet hanging out from under a white sheet, man. That's my son's feet, man. I don't have to see no more. Is it an old story? Hell yeah. It's an old story, huh? In our community. My life totally changed. We started the peace treaty meetings. We went from 56 gang-involved killings to 2. And so now here I sit almost 25 years later with a body of work.
I mean, who wants to help gang members? It's not a common or sexy issue that people were really gonna rally around.
You know, when you're living in a war zone, it's just obvious that you'd also be really experienced at peace building, because that's how you keep your own children alive.
There is nothing normal about forgiving somebody, especially someone who takes your kid away from you.
Saving lives is what we do first. You've got to stop the fear factor in a given community. You've got to stop the blood flow if you want that community to move forward. You've got to create a holistic ability for that community to empower itself.
That's how we're going to reduce this damn violence, no disrespect.
What happened with Trayvon Martin? I can't help it. I'm a youth. You feel me? I could have been any one of us right here.
I'm sick of bearing youth. I'm sick of bearing students. I'm really, really fucking sick of it.
A true proper gang intervention model is one where people have street credibility.
Kids walking around there now because of this transformation that's going on that would not normally be walking around here.
Law enforcement may say, hey, you're too close to these gang members. You have to let them know that you're there for them, but then you also have to be responsive to us.
People don't have a clue, man, what a hardcore gang interventionist has to deal with.
I was facing life in prison because of the work.
Regardless of what's going on with our families, many of them, let me be very honest, are falling apart because most of our time is put in the streets.
There's really no process really to deal with the type of trauma that comes to doing this work.
Streets, incarceration, deportation, death. Streets, incarceration, deportation, death. That's the cycle that young people are trapped in.
I was supposed to be the first one to graduate out of my family. I was the first one to go to jail out of my family.
When I was 12 years old, my mother was incarcerated. I was the main provider for a family of me and my sister. And my involvement in a youth center was what pulled me out of the trenches.
At the end of the day, if you don't do nothing, it's gonna be you and ain't nobody gonna help you.
If you don't bring out the beauty in young people, it will turn into violence. I find that the most important part of the work now is the healing part.
I think young people create their own miracles all the time. I see it here.
People say, oh no, you ain't gonna be able to do that. Well, guess what? I did that too! Young people, strive on. Nothing can stop you.
I used to have a lot of resilience to my mom. Stand up, man. But I feel liberated right now, you know? I feel free.
The system is set up to make us fail, and I just want to prove them wrong.
We don't have the resources we need. We don't have the power base economically we need.
If LA just helped people to keep doors open, lights on, all kind of magic would happen.
The spirit of murder and violence gets over a city.
Our role is temporary, and we've got to educate others to come in and pick up the banner and move this process forward.
I feel like this is what I have to owe my community.
I think in some ways, as my own way of gangbanging now, it's against the system that created this problem in the first place. It's the duty to do what's right, you know, what drives me. and no matter the price that you have to pay.
Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for attending this very important dialogue and presentation. I do want to thank Fabien Deborah for his wonderful piece and narrative sharing. We're moving forward, and what I want to do at this point is introduce our amazing guest speakers. We have Lupita Carballo from Youth Justice Coalition, CIHO. We have Annalisa Enrile, community organizer, academic researcher from the USC Suzanne Dworak-Peck School of Social Work. And we have Aquil Basheer from P.C.I.T.I. I'm Robert Hernandez, and I am a senior lecturer at USC. But I wanted to open up to the panelists here to just see your interpretation of what we just witnessed, what we just saw on the video piece. What did you take away from that video, and what comes up for you? So I just open it up.
Hi, Robert. Thank you for having me on the panel. First of all, I just wanted to thank Fabian also for that video. I thought it was so powerful. I saw you there, Aquil. I think what that video brings up for me is the times that we are living in. And the community strength that we are living in. You know, none of this happened overnight is what I like to remind everybody. This is a long enduring struggle, but we are entering, I think, pieces where, you know, we can't be afraid to call things as they are. We can't be afraid to get up and stand up. And this really critical role that the youth is taking, you know, that to me came out very loud and clear. If we, you know, help support that future, they will build it themselves. And I think that that is what has been the most astounding thing to me in the past few months.
Thank you, thank you. How about you, Lupita? What did you feel about the video?
I definitely seen a lot of old faces that I still see around. I was so emotional because it's just my peers. I seen Jose Gallegos. He's a Lobo. He's facing some time right now. I've never met this guy, but I've heard a lot about him. Heard how much he's really kicked the Capitol and how much he's impacted a lot of young people, and just to see that it's not done. Like, this work is still not done, and it still needs to be continued. There's still people trapped in the middle. When I mean in the middle, it's just like you have one foot in and you have one foot out. Like, you're trying your best, but trying your best is not gonna cut it. It's not gonna cut it because it's not, you are the first person to get out. So when you become the first person of getting out, that's the troublesome that you already have, because everybody's already against you. Like, who are you? Why are you changing? Why are you being this individual? So just seeing Tanisha, like, I had the honor to work along with Tanisha. She was my, I would say, a supervisor at a point, you know. Like, I've had an honor to work for her. Kim too, like, just being able to work with Kim and just able to see that things are still the same. Things are changing slowly. It's like a quicksand. And I just can't wait. It's just all sunken in.
Thank you, Lupita. Thank you. How about Aquil Basheer? Your thoughts on the video and your takeaways? You're on mute. You're on mute.
Robert, since I was in the video, I'll pass that to my panelists and I'll chime in at the end. Fair enough?
Sure, sure. Fabian, any thoughts on the video piece that you saw?
No, I mean, I think that, you know, it's just, I saw a lot of great people there, you know what I mean? Alex Sanchez, Luis Rodriguez, you know what I mean? A little younger version of Luis Rodriguez, you know, but I always say that, but it's good to see, those leaders, and yeah, those are influencers. And I think we all have a responsibility, as I feel like I have a responsibility, and it is important that we invest in the homies and homegirls who have been systemically impacted or excluded, so that they too can find their value and through healing, and then they too can be the beacons of hope greatly needed within our communities. And that's what I got from just seeing those great leaders in that film, you know.
Thank you. How about you, Aquil?
Well, respects to the architects. Appreciate you, Brother Robert, for putting this together, and respects to all my panelists and those that are listening in. What you saw there was inspiration through desperation. You saw individuals that don't want to be the target, but want to hit the target. You saw people that want to create a way out of no way. See, one of the things we've got to understand, if we're going to move a process forward, not only must we pass that process on and create succession plans, but we got to make sure we leave templates. We've got to make sure that we're doing this for public service as opposed to self-service. So you saw individuals that were not asking for permission to be great. You saw individuals that are not asking for permission or not looking for comfortability and moving a process forward that is going to define the reality in which they operate from. And the cross-section of individuals that you saw in that, the collaboration of expertise, you saw a process being developed that is going to create a system that is hopefully going to afford us to hit the target at the end of the day.
Thank you, thank you. And I want to stay on that, because as we move forward and we're talking about a community-based approach to social justice, what is that? What does that look like?
Were you asking me, or are you throwing that out there?
I'm throwing it out to everyone. I think, Annalisa, did you want to say?
No, you go, Aquil, you lead us.
Well, when you're talking about a community-based process, what you're talking about, a process, that has been driven by community individuals that creates a methodology at the end of the day to articulate their narrative, their way, their wants and needs, and to make sure that that community voice is at the table dictating what the policy of that process looks like. We are talking about individuals that are at the table. We have an old saying from the street: if you're not at the table, you're probably on the menu. So we as a community have to drive a process that determines our end result, that dictates our narrative, that has our inclusive voice in the process, and that understands that we are going to be unapologetic of defining the self-determination and the self-reliance that we need to create that social system of equality.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah, and I really think just to kind of add to that, you know, this piece around systems. I'm a big ecosystems person, and so looking kind of at all the pieces, right? So in addition to being at the table and that type of, I used to say collaboration, but now I say leadership because, you know, we weren't really getting anywhere with collaboration. There's lots of spaces where people in the community, so grateful for this space at the table, or so grateful for access to resources, are very polite. And I feel like those days of politeness are done. And so, you know, I say now, if we talk about community messages of or community definitions of social justice, then that really has to be community led. So whether you are talking about survivors, lived experience, community residents, that's how it has to happen. But, you know, again, just going back to the systems piece, so really overhaul, whatever you call it, our structures. So really looking at these structures that we know are not working and not being afraid to say, well, then if those structures aren't working, we have to reimagine them. We have to revamp them. And in some places we have to totally get rid of them and put something better in its place. And I think that that's really scary, you know, but is really necessary.
Thank you. And sticking to that, and when you had also said, you know, this is something new that we're in right now. It's a historic thing that's been evolving throughout time. And if we look at that, you know, we hear Lupita say, you know what, in that video I saw this colleague of mine, this friend of mine, and now, you know, where are they? And this one was a leader. And just from a a youth perspective with Youth Justice Coalition, who has been around for a number of years and have always received some pushback because they're brass and they're attempting to say, no, we need to be heard. Lupita, what are your thoughts now? Like where you're at now? Because you're deep in the movement from your lens coming up, you know?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Aquil. Everything he said, I don't even want to repeat anything. The only thing that I'll definitely add in there is the voices of young people are left out all the time because we're too young. We don't know nothing. We don't know what we're talking about, and that's wrong because, as Fabian you heard earlier, he said we grew up too fast. We're forced to grow up too fast. The struggle made us grow up too fast, and that's what people don't understand. That at a 15, like you have to at a 15, you're an adult. Basically, you're an adult. You need to make your own ends. Make sure you wash your clothes. You figure out how you're gonna get to school. You figure everything out. Is one thing I definitely would want to say. The fact that young people voices are always left out. And just if they are left out, they're left out for a reason because we don't know this platform. This traditional way at a regular school, it's always been hi, I agree. Like you obey to the teacher, whatever the teacher and administrator say you need to do. Like simply now they're saying that you can't wear your pajamas on online school. What are you gonna do? How can you tell them what to wear on online school? And they didn't even make that decision collectively with the young people. They decided to do that on themselves. So yeah.
Thank you. And one piece that Fabian you highlighted is just being able to capture the perspective of the youth, really listen to the youth. And you said, maybe we're not asking the right questions. Maybe we need to really listen. Do you want to speak to that?
Well, I mean, I just think that a lot of these youth, I've heard people and organizations at times say that we build resiliency. And I say, wrong. They already come with resiliency, homie. All we're doing is creating a space and allowing for the interpersonal connections to take place so they too can tap into that strong, powerful medicine that they already bring. And I think the minute you begin to allow the space and the voices to be heard, then the information arises, which only brings forth the relevancy needed in order to help these youth along or themselves along, really. We're just orchestrating. When I facilitate, it's orchestrating and creating a space enough comfortable enough for them to really speak their minds and hearts, and there they will find their true self, and they're the ones really informing me. It's not what I bring, it's mainly what I take away, to be honest with you, as selfish as it sounds. But this is what needs to happen. And most of the times adults sometimes as adults we can fall into that same little trap, which is very prescriptive, because a lot of these youth have been told what to do since day one. But when have we asked them, what is it that you want to do? What is it that you feel you need? Because all this time we've been told, not only from our own parents, school systems, probation, police, don't do this, don't do that, that is wrong, don't do that. And it's like, damn, homie, what is it that I can do? So we flip the script, and that's the idea. And I think that's the beauty, and that's where the empowerment will take place. And best believe me, some of the greatest ideas I've heard come from the youth.
Yes. So going with that, Annalisa, you kind of sparked it off saying, you know what, we've been going through this, but we often do lose the voices of our youth, of our young. So moving forward, as you're hearing, like, we need to really reimagine public safety, defund police. We need to take these new types of strategies. How do we ensure that we are really taking a community-based approach and ensuring social justice through community? And how does that look with incorporating youth voices, incorporating everyone's voice? But how do we ensure that it doesn't become a repackaging of the same old, which we see time and time again with these initiatives coming out saying, hey, look at what we have. But when you look at it, it's like, wow, that's what we've been doing time and time again. You just kind of repackaged it. How do we ensure it?
I don't know. I don't have the full answer, but I do say this. One is we live in a really kind of instant gratification world where we want a quick answer to everything. We want a response, right away in 140 characters or less, and we have to admit to ourselves that this is going to take a lot of work, right? And I think that, that type of intentionality, when we talk about making sure that youth voices are heard, I mean, it's not like a slogan. It's not like a pipe dream. It's a very clear to do. Make sure youth voices are heard. Then have youth at the table. Have youth in your community advisory boards. When you are talking about things, like Lupita mentioned, as big as how do we come back, in the fall to schools, ask the students what they need. We, from social work, we always say we try to start where the client is, but we have to broaden that definition of who the community is to make sure that all aspects of the community are represented. And especially when we're talking about immigrant communities and marginalized communities, in our immigrant communities, the youth play such a crucial role because they are really the bridges between older generations and institutions. And so you can't ignore their perspective. And I also think, in terms of that very complicated question that you asked, is that we have to reimagine, we have to also look at how we are looking at these problems and issues. And, Aquil said this earlier around, the community and the history. And we have to go look at real root causes. Again, like just as these different organizations didn't start yesterday or last month, these problems have root causes that we have not challenged. When we talk, what are the real roots of racism? What is the role of capitalism? What type of patriarchy is happening in these communities?
So with that, I turn over to Aquil. You're talking about systems, you're talking about history, redesign, dismantling. And then we also think of somebody who's actually one of the last original remaining members of the Black Panther Party. The median age of the Black Panther Party was 16, 17. With this movement. So I don't know if you want to talk about how do we include youth voices, but also establish the key systems that are really change gaming,
Well, I would start with this. How are we going to make decisions about them without them? Okay, our youth are not dumb. I think Lupita said it so well. If the elders don't get out of the way, the youth will never lead. I think we need to do some serious inflection. The first thing I do when I work with my youth, I apologize to them because my generation has not given them the type of infrastructure to move themselves forward. I am not lumping everybody in that category. All of you, I wouldn't lump into that category because you've done some outstanding work. But we have to realize, if we're talking about real leadership, we have to realize that leadership is only there for a moment. That leadership is to guide something in that time period. And when that leadership's time is up, it has to move. The time for our youth is now. The time for our youth have always been, the youth have always been the ones that have sparked the revolutionary fever to cause social change in this country. I was a Panther at 15, and I know what my thinking process was in the movement. I was unstoppable, I was unapologetic, and I knew what I wanted to do and where I was going to go. Now, did I have all the tools? No, but I thought I did. And so that's where my eldership came in to mold me, to give me some direction. But they didn't try to tell me, Aquil, this is what you need to do. They gave me some options. They respected and valued my voice. They respected the fact that my normality was what it was. They didn't try to put me into their normality. See, we don't listen to our youth. Our youth give us a normal that they want to operate from, and we look from our perspective and always want to redirect that normal because we think we have this inherent expertise from being over here 40, 50, 60 years. That is not the case. And we've got to look at and value that. When we listen, we have to listen not to speak, but to listen to hear.
and we rarely do that. Our youth will tell you what they need. Our societal structure will tell you what it needs. The people who are traumatized and are feeling the ills of social injustice will tell you what they need if you just listen. And when they tell you, don't construct based on your normality, construct based on meeting their needs. Lastly, those systems have to be predicated on the needs of the individuals we're trying to serve. Those of us that are elders, which I am one of, I realize that I have got to pass this on with a succession plan, and I have got to give those young adults everything they need to not only be where I was at, but to be better than where I was at and what I was able to bring to the table. And I think that's the kind of mindset we've got to step in here. Why do we think we can put crowns on clowns and expect kings and queens? We've got to give them the expertise that they ask for to where they're going to be able to drive their vision at the end of the day with their normality. And we've got to act as support mechanisms and foundational pieces that they can land on when they fall, but not try to drive them and guide the process of where they're going.
Thank you. And at this point, Lupita, being with Youth Justice Coalition, who I feel is not just on a local level, one of the most credible youth organizers, I would say nationwide. What you all are doing, do you want to speak about how you approach this within the Youth Justice Coalition, how you attempt to really continue to lead change over there at Youth Justice Coalition?
Yeah, definitely. I think the way how I see how I want to do change is definitely the fact that we are in my community. I went to Charles Drew Middle School, I went to Russ Elementary School. We used to be in Inglewood, now we're in South Central. So once we moved there, I was like, all right, like I feel it. I started getting a lot of young people that I grew up with when they were younger. We used to get on the ice cream truck together. So bringing them into the space, but at the same time, like thinking about like who did I look for when I was a younger person, like, and that's who I want to become to these younger people. You know, like I've become this auntie, you know. I've become in so many hats to young people in my community or in the school. Exactly. I ask questions that I wish people asked me questions, you know, like, how was your day? How was your weekend? Or are you okay? Have you ate? You know, or just simply not even asking, have you ate? Because they're too embarrassed to say no, you know, like, do you want to go grab something to eat? Let's go get something to eat, you know. Not really asking, but just doing it. Because even I felt that as a young person, like if somebody asks me for something, then I'm asking for a handout, and I'm agreeing to that handout. So instead of just doing it, like, here you go, here's this book, or here's this pencil. You don't have a pencil today. Why are you not in class? Let's talk about it. Why are you not in class? Oh, this and this and that. Oh, the teacher's bullshit. I stop playing with me. Like, why are you really not in class? Like, you know, like, what's going on? And they'll break it down. Definitely has been, I didn't become this person overnight, you know, like, and I didn't know all this politics overnight. Like it was a lifesaver for me when I stepped into Chucos, when I stepped into this place, and I heard them talking about defunding the police. That's where I was like, where the hell have I been at my whole life? But as well, just like being able to have that platform is definitely what brought me into the space, is having that platform, and the way how they introduced me to the platform. At first I thought it was a joke, you know, the way how they were passing laws and passing motions. Thought it was a joke. I thought, like, there's no way these people listen to us. There's no way. And I continued doing it. I continued going to the Capitol. I continued until I saw the change and I saw the progress. I was like, wow, like this is real. Like we, like, people really from the community, thugs from the community, because we don't. We have a t-shirt and jeans, you know, for the most, a clean white t-shirt for the most. So just being able to be in a different city too, in Sacramento. Like, I've never been to Sacramento. I don't remember leaving as when I was little, you know. So just being able to see new things, and somebody that definitely never gave up on me, you know, like I went through LAUSD. Everybody gave up on me. There was a certain point of my life that I knew that I wanted to become better, but because of the person that I was before, they didn't see that I wanted to become better. They took me as a joke. But when I stepped into YJC, they seen potential in me, and even when I fell through the cracks, they still pushed me, and they still went to go look for me, and they asked me, "What the hell is your problem? Like, what is going on with you? Like, this is not you. This is something that's not going to be tolerated, and it's not going to be tolerated because we know better." So just having somebody as a standby is who I am to my community as well too. Like, being able to talk to me however you want to talk to me. If you feel like talking to me as respect for today, then I would definitely, we can definitely go more into details. But sometimes I do get cussed at, you know, sometimes I do be called to be traitor, especially being a Latina, you know, like even like noticing that there's so much prejudice still going on in my community, you know, and even within the young people, the fact how they call me out and they tell me like, how could you be a betrayer? I'm like, wait, hold on, wait a minute. Like, you need to understand that we come from the same struggle, and you need to understand that there's things that happen that this is why we don't get along, and maybe we need to communicate, maybe we need to talk. Maybe you don't know, like, you don't know what this person is going on, and that person doesn't know what you got going on. You don't even know what the hell, why do you hate him? You know that you hate him because you hate him. So really breaking down the prejudice is also who I am to my community, and I wouldn't have all these tools if I never would have stepped into YJC.
So thank you, because we have some credible agencies and organizations. And Annalisa, I'm going to turn to you because there's so many credible organizations that are doing meaningful and purposeful work, as you are well aware, that when we sometimes start to build a policy or a strategy that we say is community driven, we often see that key credible organizations are left out of the picture. How do we ensure that people, voices that have relationships with the community, are a part of the solution? And I'm asking because you're working in an academic institution that we're called upon to help in this, but how do we always make sure that we have credible people represented?
Again, I don't think it's that hard. We just have to make sure, I mean, we just have to do, it's a question of doing it, right? So it's not like we don't know these answers. We know them. It's a question of how do we do it? And in terms of who is credible, you know, my experience is that these different organizations, not just the ones we have here that are represented, but other organizations, their work speaks for themselves. So, you know, to vet organizations more based on their work and their commitment and relationship to the university, as opposed to their titles and their, you know, and where they fit in, you know, this kind of imaginary hierarchy that we've created. And I think that more of these partnerships are really needed because, you know, we have some great organizations that aren't even nonprofits. Like some community organizations are just like really committed groups of people that are doing the work that just need access to some of the resources that some of these really larger organizations that, you know, may be phoning it in are always like the first in line to these resources. And I found in my work, when you can help grassroots community groups out, then that $500,000, $10,000 is going to go a long way. And you know, also to that effect is something you were talking about earlier, Robert, when you mentioned the Black Panther Party. One of the things that I fully remember is the ability for communities to take care of themselves. So issues like schooling, issues like policing, you know, if communities feel empowered and are proactive, that's something that we have seen in history, right? That is why organizations like that are such a huge threat, is because they are providing concrete alternatives that are irrefutable.
Well taken, well received. And I'm going to turn to Aquil. Would you like to comment? There's so many great points.
So much good stuff from all the panelists. I want to go back to something that Annalisa said earlier, and she was spot on when she said that so many of the organizations and so many of our people are not bringing their power to the table to let that power speak for themselves. Look, at the end of the day, we've got to understand something. The dominant society has allowed social justice to be, or social injustice to be, an acceptable norm. And then they've enforced that with certain rules and laws and policies that have been in place for decades. When you've got people who are under that type of canceristic oppression, don't you think it forms a certain concept in terms of our mental thinking? It's not just saying we're going to shift the narrative and change all of these policies, these practices, etc. Some people are so saturated with the inability to perceive their greatness, they don't think they can make change happen. So we've got to look at that on all norms. We've got to realize if we are going to allow our narrative to be the driving force, we've got to stop asking for permission. We've got to come through these doors. Power respects power. That means we've got to unify. We've got to strategize. We can't roll with emotionalism, but we must run with disciplined strategy that at the end of the day, we can dictate the infrastructure that we want to see. We can't get in these moments and think about movements without understanding that we have to make sure that we build institutions at the end of the day. So, you know, one of the things we clearly understood in the Panther Party, we were unapologetic, we were uncompromising. We knew what we were doing, and we were able to go all the way for the cause of what we believe. Am I dictating that to anybody now? No, I'm not. I'm saying that is a mindset and a framework that you have to embrace. We embraced that. We understood self-empowerment. We understood the fact that, just like Annalisa said, we had our own schools. We had over 57 survival programs because we knew self-determination at the end of the day, because of the fact that we were going up against an oppressive, suppressive system that didn't want us to see that level of greatness. We need to quit thinking that everybody out here wants social justice. There are some entities in operation and components in power that don't want to see a balanced playing field, don't want to see at the end of the day that liberation to happen to where everybody gets a fair chance to move themselves forward. And if we don't accept that mindset, if we quit running around here thinking that we have to make everybody feel comfortable with the fact that we want to move to create a just and a humanistic society for all, shame on us, not them. So we've got to, as I so said, we've got to look at self-inflection. We've got to look at our strong points and our weak points. And most importantly, Anna talked about collaboration. I think the problem with collaboration in the past is it's been just that, people coming together. We need collaborative, achievement-driven processing when we come together as unified individuals working to achieve. We need clear-cut, crystal clear precision goals that this collaborative is going to work on. Then the system or the methodology that we employ is going to be based on those goals. And at the end of the day, we include timelines in that. And our leadership, even in that process, is going to be driven by what we design in terms of where we want to go. But that's going to take a collective effort. That's going to take our young adults. That's going to take our elders. That's going to take, as we do in the African community, we have that unified circle that we all operate from. We've got to go back to those principles and practice that has driven us as communities of color, that have driven us in the past to get where we wanted to do and made us successful. We've got to, if at the end of the day, we want to see a different output, we've got to change the input.
Look, I absolutely 100 agree. And I think that also, you know, when you were talking, one of the things that came to me very loudly and clearly is also this whole issue of positionality. So, you know, 100% correct that not everyone is fighting for social justice. And, you know, for the simple reason that there are people that are benefiting from the status quo that would like us to maintain the status quo. And look, this is what I tell my students. Oh, I'm moving now, Robert. This is what I tell my students. If you want to go into social work and you want to be a social worker, you will have this choice that is put in front of you. Do you maintain that status quo or do you fight for social justice? Because social justice, again, let me remind everybody out there who is listening, is one of our pillars of social work. It's where we come from, it's where we were born from, and it's something we cannot conveniently walk away from just because we now can also occupy these other positions within institutions that quite frankly have to be fixed.
Excellent, excellent. At this time, I want to give the audience the chance to pose some questions. So if we have some questions.
Sure, so if you're in the audience and you'd like to ask a question, press the raise hand button, and then we'll give you an opportunity to ask your question live, through the microphone on your computer or your phone. We also have some questions that are submitted through the Q&A pod, so I can start reading those. The first one I believe is for Fabian. It says, I like how you say you realized you live in a community and wanted to be a positive influence. How do you get others who have been in gangs to view the value that they can contribute to their community in a positive manner?
Man, I think that's where healing needs to happen, right? I mean, what is the awareness, right? And I think for me, and being given an opportunity to really transform my life, not only because of the choices I made, but I think the first thing for me personally, I was embraced with my baggage and everything that I've done. One minute I was embraced with my baggage and everything that I did without judgment, then I started to feel again. Once I was able to feel again, then I started to believe in myself again. And then I started to recognize the importance and the value that I brought, that I had been oppressed and suppressed due to the immigration obstacles and everything that I was told by my own parents. So then I figured, so for me, it's about that. It's about, you got to learn to love and accept the homeboys and homegirls as they are, for what they are. The minute you begin to love them, embrace them without judgment, then they start to love themselves. Once they begin to love themselves, then the aha or the light bulbs click in, and then the awareness happens. And that's when I began to shine light, because for many years, I've been blaming me. I'm a F up, I'm a piece, all that. But then they say, nah, homie, check this out. Let me shine light on this big systemic infrastructure, homie, that was created for you to take upon these choices that were laid out in these housing projects for you. I get it now. And I think that's what I tend to do. Is first we have to allow the person that we're serving, homeboy, homegirl, whoever it may be, to begin to feel again by loving. We love them until they learn to love themselves, and then we can begin to influence them with the awareness needed, so they too can begin to navigate through these systemic infrastructures that continue to try to create these dead ends that I'm so familiar with, and I think that's one antidote that I could do. But in order for it to be successful and these dead ends not to continue to arise, then it is for me personally, it's important that I hold these systemic infrastructures accountable. I mean, I have to make sure that I shine light on these injustices and the criteria and requirements that continue to exclude me. Because if I am here to invite folks and show them that there is a better way, and yet the better way is not there because they're still consumed by these criteria. What is formal education? What does that have to do with me? When do we begin to centralize lived experience as professionalism, so then I can have a fair chance into coexisting? I'm not here to take your position. I'm just here to coexist. And together we can make this world a safer place. Yeah. You see, one thing that I discovered, and I trip out, and not to take away or disrespect any of your students or USC, but it dawns onto me that when it's time for someone to write a thesis, they find their subject, and that is Fabian. So then they say, Fabian, how is it that you were able to transform your life? Tell me. I began to share of my story and my trajectory and the things that I discovered. They write their thesis, they get accredited for it to get their degrees, and then Fabian needs now to take the back seat. And it's like, interesting. So then when do I get a credit for my own lived experience so that I too can have a fair chance? And it happens over and over again. Now, I don't mind giving you an interview for your thesis, but when do I get accredited so that I can compete too? Or invite me to be part of the fabric, so together we can move this thing along. And I only say that because we haven't gotten to the place where we learn to validate and professionalize lived experience. Because I think for me, that's where a lot of the antidotes lie, rest or lie. Thank you for, I hope I answered your question. I just get pumped up too once in a while. I start getting, but thank you for, I hope I answered your question.
Thank you. We have a lot of questions coming in. The next one is a live from Shaka Barrows. Unmute and you can ask your question.
All right, can you all hear me?
Yes, sir.
We can.
Good to see so many folk, and it's real powerful testimony on this panel. This always gets me charged and motivated. One of the things that we talk about really trying to transform, for me, I frame it as transforming the very notion of what justice even means in this country, right? We need to go all the way back to the very root of this and think about that. And to do that, we have to understand a little bit of history. I know it's not a part of American culture to be deep steeped in history, but I think we have to go back and understand some historical aspects and framework around this. And when we do that, there's just a long history in this country of wanting to punish the other, right? Whomever is deemed as the other, it's not just enough to reduce your opportunity, but it's that we meet anything that you do with punishment, right, and harm. And I think that I'm curious because that harm and punishment then gets internalized. So a lot of in our own cultures, in our communities, because we've all been exposed to this for generations, there's also this notion that we need to harm and we need to punish, you know, at some level each other to kind of help the person get to the next level. And yet what I hear from you all is not that. I hear love, support, you know, really reaching folks where they're at. So I just want to bring in this conversation around punishment, because we also have to deal with the need for punishment from other adults, right? The adults who run and administer these systems are having a hard time letting go, even if they're open to reform. There's often a struggle around this idea of there's no punishment involved in what you all are talking about. You know, where is the punishment, right? And they won't say it like that. I use that word because it's uncomfortable. They'll frame it as accountability and public safety. So I don't see accountability in what you're saying. I don't see where the public safety is being taken into consideration. And for me, I see those as tag words for the deeper notion of needing to punish, right? And you know, that could be many things in our society. We're on a harm reduction scale. We're trying to reduce structural harm all over the place. But punishment can still be removing you from your home, putting that electronic ankle bracelet on you, right? Doing something that's beyond necessary. And so I appreciate also, Fabian, about the resiliency, how you spoke that it's already there, right? And it's not like we're providing resiliency, but what I hear you all talking about is like just really leaning on that and engaging it. So how do we grapple with this punishment that has been so much embedded in this country's history? It's embedded in the notion of justice and the justice system. Lady Justice carries a sword, right? So, you know, the very imagery of justice has violence tied into it, and retribution. And so, how do we grapple with that? Or how do you all, you know, what do you have to offer in that? Not looking for easy answers here, but just, you know, deep reflection and contribution. And again, I appreciate the panel.
Annalisa? Okay.
I think, you know, just as we're talking about how do we redefine justice, this is also how do we redefine things like accountability and, you know, what you've raised in terms of quote unquote punishment, right? And I think that we are starting to develop some restorative justice models and transformative justice models that address that go well beyond kind of that law enforcement legal paradigm to get to, you know, what Fabian was talking about in terms of healing. And what communities, right? Not just, you know, we tend to think of legal ramifications as, you know, one against, like, you know, the enemy and the, you know, two sides, but really whole communities are affected. So how do we begin to kind of address whole communities? You know, it's not just kind of a victim or survivor, a perpetrator, et cetera. There's families attached to that. There's communities attached to that. So when we talk about healing, how do we utilize these different paradigms in any conflict situations? But I do agree with you, you know, people want to see people accountable, but that's, you know, part of, we have to also ask ourselves, what systems are those part of? And as you mentioned, what is the kind of historical roots to that? You know, like when you say accountability, to me, I hear reparations. And that's not even where, you know, our country's not even ready to have those discussions. So I think we keep it small, you know, in that box of punishment.
I think something that I also discovered for me personally is like if we can work with an individual at a time, you know, because there's the historical experience that my parents had that I'm familiar with, but I think due to my own personal healing and the fact that I'm still in active recovery, I think now I'm aware on what is familiar. So when these things arise, whether it's systemic, whether it's communal, whether it's, you know, relative, whomever, I am now very aware, and I am very aware of how I identify what is triggering me. And then I think for me, that is what allows me to continue to navigate. You say no, I say yes. And I think I've gotten to where I'm at now by doing that and just being able to dialogue or conversate with me. And I push until I get like what Aquil said, you know what I mean? You know, we have the power too, you know, power too. And so for me, it took me my own personal healing to rebuild my own confidence and to recognize that I too have value. And guess what? Now I'm about to share what that looks like. And if you're in this position, in the position to dialogue, then your professionalism should then meet mine. Now let's conversate and dialogue. And there is no feelings hurt here now because I'm doing my recovery. I'm cool. Call it as it is. And I think that's what I try to cultivate. I think when I hold these spaces is for the personal healing to happen so they too can reconnect and identify what those triggers may be. And then the familiarity happens where then they become confident just enough to push that effort forward, whatever that effort or process is that we're trying to accomplish, right? So it comes with personal healing because I'd be a fool if I create violence and knowing what's already out there, because I'm not exempt. I've been clean 15 years, clean and sober, and I know what I'm not exempt from, but I'd be a fool if I give them that. You know what I mean? But it took recovery and healing for allow me to see this, you know? I don't know if I'm answering it, but that's just something that I've experienced.
You know, I'm so glad Fabian mentioned healing a long time ago. Look, I too came out of the culture. I was very deep in the culture long before the party. And let me tell you something. When we use violence, violence is not a root cause. Violence is a symptom to something that hasn't been dealt with that is usually from a dysfunctional root cause. You're never going to get public safety. And let's really be clear with public safety and what public safety is. Public safety is the ability to make the public safe. We have removed the public from public safety. And this is a big part of the problem with public safety now. Public safety doesn't respect our marginalized communities. It doesn't respect our underserved communities. We have relabeled public safety, and public safety has become a suppression model for these communities. In order for us, and when we use that violence, I'm using that violence because I'm either stressed at a state of distress that has not been dealt with, and violence gets that quick attention. So when we look at this country and we talk about punishment, we're talking about, again, a system to achieve an end goal, which is far bigger than the punishment. Either it's restricting, it is suppression, it is oppression, etc. We got to be crystal clear on how these systems are actually operating. When we build out these systems, I want to give my respect to now Congressman Tony Cardenas, who built out the two-pronged process, which is being utilized across the nation now, that dealt not only with gang violence, but dealt with comprehensive community violence. And these systems address quite a few things. It addressed the life-saving efforts that we need to deal with first. We've got to stop the bloodshed in our communities if we want our communities to take ownership. But that is only the start process. If we don't go past that and create the equitable services that are going to allow those individuals not to use the antisocial methodology of violence, if we don't create the ability for our people to heal, and not only heal, it is a process. Once we heal them, I'm going to move them now to restoration. I have got to bring a person back to where they're fully restored, to where they feel they're liberated to be a part of the system and don't have to go back to those antisocial ways. See, we can't just put a Band-Aid on and think we're in the process. And as Fabian so well said, that healing is ongoing. We have been marginalized and traumatized, and that trauma stays with us for the duration of our life. Some of us have a better resiliency, a better safety nets, but that trauma stays with us. So that two-pronged process, we also created a trilateral collaboration with Dr. Joey Nunez and Steve Kim out of Kinship out of San Diego, out of San Diego, and Steve Kim out of Orange County, and us in Los Angeles, trying to do just that, build these processes or systems that are going to supersede us. Let me say lastly, in the public safety system, why the system creation is so important and that system be driven by us is because that system has to supersede us. We have got too many people-driven systems in our communities, and when those people are removed from the process, the system usually dies or fails. So we've got to create those succession validated systems that drive the process, and the two-prong is one of that. Lastly, and let me end it on this. As we go back to public safety, we're talking about defunding the police department. Do we have the infrastructure to come into that community and do what's necessary? Do we have the capability of creating those urban safety navigators that are going to be able to control the dynamics of that community? I say instead of defund, let's refund and reallocate and make sure our community gets the right tools they need to, as I said earlier, become self-determinant, self-reliant, drive the processes, and work in collaboration with those systems when and where we can, but be unapologetic and letting those systems know we are driving this process and not you.
All right, we have time for one last question. This one says, I'm wondering how those of us who work in larger systems can make sure that we do everything we can to better inform our work and make sure that we are helping our community versus simply upholding the system that we work for.
Look, it's important for us to be part of these larger institutions and in a number of tables, so to speak. But how can you make sure that you're helping communities and not just upholding the status quo? I think the first is awareness and education. And to truly get that, I mean, I don't mean extra degrees or CEUs. I mean, really understanding some of the things that we've talked about: historical context, empowerment. When we talk about research, like how are we responsible to the community when we do research, right? How do we not parachute in, get what the data we need, and then leave and bounce without ever sharing that, with the community? And some of that awareness and education means you have to get out of your own way. So, you have to, and I think that a lot of what we have learned in the last few months around privilege and white guilt and fragility is sometimes you just have to say, I'm wrong, and be able to, move from there. And then I also think about innovative ways in which to challenge the system. And that challenge isn't always going to look like all out revolution, because you want to keep your job too. So that may be, bringing these folks that, Dr. Hernandez talked about earlier. How do you bring the right people to the table? How do we make sure youth voices are heard? Especially for those of us that are working in child welfare, your role as an advocate for youth is so important and is so pivotal. And you really can use that as a platform to make sure that, you're not just advocating for your clients, but that you're teaching and you're also letting your clients advocate for themselves. And there's so many different ways we can use technology and crowdsourcing and social media and these types of platforms to make sure that those voices are heard.
I'll piggyback on that. Look, I might sound anti-system and anti-collaboration. Bar none, that's totally the opposite. I believe the only way we are going to be successful at the end of the day, from a societal perspective, from a community perspective, is we have massive collaboration. But as we collaborate with these larger systems, whether it be the academic system, whether it be the funding system, whether it be the municipal structure system, what those systems have to understand when they are speaking for the community, they can't get in the driver's seat and tell us what we need and where we need to go. They have a role in the process and they need to understand what that role is. Let us help them divine that role and work with us in partnership as opposed to leadership where they lead the process. If they're leading the process, the story that is going to be written is going to be based on their perspective and not ours from the community perspective. And this is what has been the problem decade after decade. We got others writing the story and expecting us to follow the storyline, and we don't have any inclusion in that chapter that is being written. Totally ridiculous. And then you wonder why you get rebellion at the end of the day. You wonder why you get people going against the system. If that system is not articulating the best needs and the best components to move them forward as an individual and as a community, we will never have that recovery process, number one. We will never have, number two, that wellness process. And number three, we will never take ownership that takes the importance for us to drive that community at the end of the day.
Excellent. And with the few remaining minutes we have, I'm just going to go around briefly and ask you, each panelist, what do we need to do now to move us forward in this moment of opportunity? What do we need to do now to move us forward? So Lupita, what do we need to do now to move us forward?
What do we need to do now to move us forward? Definitely acknowledge those who came before us. I've always said, like, it's easy, like, we don't want to say it's peaceful protest because it's not peaceful protest, but it definitely has been a peaceful protest because people that came before us definitely went through it for us in order for us to be able to even be able to protest. What do we do now? Definitely just being informed. Definitely, if there is no room for us in the table, force your way into that table. At the table, that's what I definitely will say. I just want to give other people a chance to say something too.
How about you, Fabian? What do we need to do now to move us forward?
Oh man, it's a gang. No, I'm just playing. I think no, well, we're living in a pivotal moment right now, and I think there's some energy that's happening, you know, it's, with these protests and the things that are currently. And how, I think for me, it's like, how do we really bring the full-on awareness and bank on this movement that is taking place right now to really, really crack the door wide open a lot wider, you know? But, you know, I just think that we need to continue, for me personally, whatever it is I need to do is continue to challenge these criteria and requirements that continue to exclude and that continue to cause, re-traumatize the populations that I service. And the way that I can do that is by continuing with my leadership and most importantly to also challenge those systemic infrastructures that are not quite ready for us and that are not quite ready for us and to bring us on the table. But I always say this, the day will come when they centralize lived experience and validate it as professionalism. And I will make sure I continue to push that forward. That's what I will keep pushing forward as an individual. And I think that's what I've been doing. That's how I've been disrupting, I think. And so, yeah, challenge the criteria, open the door wider, and let's coexist, man. You know, give us credit, man.
Thank you, thank you. Annalisa, what do we need to do to move us forward?
I think it's, as you said, time to take advantage of these opportunities. And so instead of, you know, corporations, although money is greatly appreciated all the time, But instead of these blind donations and these one-time, one-stop trainings, let's start to really rebuild our institutions, whether that be from the private sector or the public sector. Let us try to not just reimagine, but re-implement, right, what it means to talk about some of these things that we've talked about in this webinar: public safety, community policing, education. What we have now is not working, and we are in the middle of a biological and social, economic, political pandemic. The most powerful thing I urge everyone to do, if I only had to pick one thing right now, is vote. We cannot have another 4 years of what we've been living through. And so, you know, we have some good choices to be making, and to not be afraid to make those brave choices. It's not going to be easy.
Thank you. And Aquil, Basheer, what do we need to do now?
First of all, I would piggyback on everything my esteemed panelists have said. I think all of them are spot on. I think we've got to take and change these movements into institutions. I think we need to see a lot more of exactly what's going on in this conversation. We have got to be precisionally clear in terms of what we want in this process. That takes discipline, that takes strategy, that takes us coming together, putting our heads together, and making sure we're putting our communities first as opposed to our self-interest. I think we got to continue to organize. We've got to continue to mobilize. We've got to continue to strategize. We got to continue to conceptualize. And then we've got to finally make sure we actualize what these processes look like.
Thank you. Well said. And to the panelists and to everyone who has participated in today's webinar, and I'd like to thank the USC Suzanne Dworak-Peck School of Social Work for supporting this idea. I'm always coming up in just 2 weeks to get this together, and they're, you know, outlandish, but it's like not outlandish. We got to actually take advantage of the opportunity right now, and we need to rise up and continue to press forward, but we need to make sure that community is always at the forefront, always leading the process, and we need to do everything we can to support that process. So I appreciate you, Annalisa, Lupita, Fabian, Aquil, Leonard, for managing this, and everyone who took the time to actually, on a Thursday late afternoon, to chime in and check out this webinar. Appreciate you. Take care. In community. Peace.
Thank you.
Thank you.